Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, we have been studying now the Satipaṭṭhāna Sutta. This is Sutta number 10 in the Majjhima Nikaya. And last time we did the introductory passage of the Sutta, and we began the contemplation of the body. We did the first section on mindfulness of breathing, just the first 4 parts of that exercise. That is the first tetrad. I shall breathe. I breathe in long. I breathe in long, out long, in short, out short. I breathe in, breathe out, experiencing the whole body. I breathe in, I breathe out, tranquilizing the bodily formation. And then I mentioned last time that each passage or each main exercise in the Satipaṭṭhāna Sutta has an additional passage attached to it, which we call the refrain. It's repeated for each exercise with actually there's no variation, but you have to see how the variation would apply in regard to that particular exercise. And so now we come to the first statement of the refrain. This is with reference to mindfulness of breathing. This is in paragraph 5. In this way, that is, in the way described above, he abides contemplating the body as a body internally, or he abides contemplating the body as a body externally, or he abides contemplating the body as a body both internally and externally. This is the first division of the refrain. Did everybody get a copy of the outline? Yeah. Now, the outline mentions that the refrain has 4 key phrases. This is 4 main divisions of the practice according to this refrain. The first phrase the first phase, you could say, deals with contemplating the object internally, externally, and both. And so there's always some problem with the interpretation of these phrases, internal, externally, and both. And different teachers, different commentators interpret the phrases in different ways. But the way, in my understanding, that makes the most sense and that accords with the use of these terms internally and externally throughout the suttas is internally refers to oneself. Ajjhatang means with reference to oneself. And externally, bahida, means with reference to what is external, especially with most of these exercises with reference to other human beings or other living beings. I've heard some explanation. Internal refers to what is going on deep within the body. External refers to what is taking place on the surface of the body. Or internal refers to sort of the deep ultimate truth, external to conventional truth. But these seem to be, you might call, elaborate explanations. They can have some meaning within the context of practice, but I don't think that they are the original meaning of the terms according to the intention of the sutta. So according to the intention of the sutta, first one abides contemplating the body as a body internally, that is with reference to one's own body. And this, I have to say also, within the actual practice tradition of Buddhist meditation, there's very little application or attempt to apply the idea of contemplating the body as a body externally. Particularly in some of these exercises, it becomes very difficult, and even there's some obscurity, unclarity, what exactly is meant and how this can be applied. But this is my understanding. Okay, with breathing, in and out breathing, of course one can experience the in and out breathing in one's own body. But the question comes up, how do you contemplate the body as a body externally and with reference to breathing in regard to the bodies of others? You can't experience the breathing taking place in the bodies of others. In my understanding, what one would do after one develops, this is in developing insight, after one develops and gains a certain insight into the process of breathing occurring in one's own body, then just temporarily, not as a continued sustained exercise, just temporarily, one would direct the mind to the fact that other human beings, other living beings, are also engaged in the process of breathing. And in this way one gets a sense of the universality of breathing, the sense of breathing as being a process that takes place throughout the entire kingdom of living beings. So one sees with one's mind's eye that the entire world, of even the universe of living beings, sentient beings, are all breathing in order to exist. And that gives a very, very deep understanding of conditionality. Okay, and then one abides contemplating the body as a body both internally and externally. That is, the way the commentary explains it, one alternates in quick succession between observing the body in oneself, between observing the breathing within one's own body, and then the way I would understand it, one diverts the mind externally to contemplate the fact that all other living beings are also breathing. And one just lets the mind dwell on that momentarily, then comes back to one's own breathing, and alternates back and forth very quickly. One's own breathing, breathing in others, breathing in oneself, breathing in others. Okay, the next phase in this refrain is directed towards contemplating the nature of arising and vanishing. And so one contemplates the object of meditation, or in this case the particular domain of mindfulness, the body, as subject to origination. Then one contemplates it as subject to vanishing, to disappearance, and one contemplates it as subject to both origination and vanishing. In the Pali, this goes Samudaya Dhammanupassi va kayasmin viharati. Vaya Dhammanupassi va kayasmin viharati. Samudaya vaya Dhammanupassi va kayasmin viharati. And some translators and interpreters, we have this phrase, Samudaya Dhammanupassi, and it's a little bit ambiguous how it should be broken up. I think, Georgette, you have the old translation. Probably he contemplates arising factors in the body. Is that how it is?
Yes.
And
or else he abides contemplating in the body its arising factor.
Yeah.
Or he abides contemplating in the body
It's
finishing factor.
Yeah. Yeah, that's because we have this. Okay, so we have a compound here. Samudaya Dham Anupassi. Anupassi is contemplation. Samudaya is arising, origination. And then Dhamma here, you see, the word Dhamma is used in many different senses. And sometimes it's used to mean phenomena, in which case it's a plural. But it's also used to mean having the nature of, or being subject to, as a suffix. And so I think it could, I don't recall whether that translation that you have, whether that came from Venerable Nyanamoli himself, or whether I had revised his original translation in that way. But you see, the commentary explains what are the factors that are responsible for origination and vanishing, and either he or myself or other translators have also done this. We take that explanation to mean, or to imply, that we should interpret Samudaya Dhamma as a plural. It abides contemplating the factors of arising, the causes of arising. And similarly, he abides contemplating the causes or factors of vanishing. So when I was doing the translation of the Samyutta Nikaya, I came across these expressions, Samudaya Dhamma and Vaya Dhamma, without Anupassi, in such a way that it was very clear that it means having the nature of, being subject to, arising and vanishing. And so, when we attach the suffix anupassi, what it means that what one is doing is contemplating the body as having the nature of origination and having the nature of vanishing, passing away. And when the commentary gives the factors responsible, the conditions for origination and vanishing, they're not intending that to be an explanation of Dhamma as a plural. They're just mentioning it as an explanation of why the body is subject to origination, why it's subject to vanishing. But it's not intended as a word explanation of Dhamma. Is that clear? Am I making that point clear? But what the commentary does indicate, that when one is contemplating the body as subject to origination, one does it from two different points of view. What we can call the point of view of conditionality, what I would call a point of view of direct experience. Okay, what one does when one contemplates the body is subject to origination by way of conditionality. Then one considers the various factors responsible for the origination, for the arising of the body. And the commentaries do this by bringing in factors from dependent origination, especially they bring in ignorance, ignorance and craving. Those are the two primary causes for the arising of the body, according to the formula of dependent origination. So it's the ignorance and craving from previous existence, from our previous existence, that has brought into being this body in this existence. And then it is particular karma factors that have given the body that have brought this particular body into being. This seems somewhat theoretical because to us it seems almost impossible to know this by direct experience. It's something that one is taking on trust as a teaching of the Buddha, since one doesn't, unless one has the ability to recollect previous lives, one doesn't see how the body comes into being from the ignorance and craving of past existences. But there are some meditation teachers who say that when the mind gets very, very subtle, particularly when one develops the power of jhana, then even if one doesn't recollect previous existences, one could apply that very subtle, very sharp mind that's been conditioned by the jhana in order to investigate the nature of the body, and then one has a direct insight into how the body arises from ignorance and craving and kama. And then one has a direct condition for the body right in this present life, and that is food. It's food, nutrition, that sustains the body. Rather strangely, the commentators don't mention the union of parents as a condition that has brought the body into being. Okay, and then what I call the direct experience aspect of origination or arising is, as one observes the body, one could experience as one observes the body with a very subtle mind, and as one extends the attention through the body and can experience the body at very subtle levels, one can experience from moment to moment the arising, coming into being of bodily phenomena, physical phenomena. So this is what we call the moment by moment arising of bodily phenomena. Okay, these are conditions that are applicable to the body in any of the exercises in the Satipaṭṭhāna Sutta. But in regard to in and out breathing, there's another condition that's responsible for its origination and vanishing, its cessation. And that would be, what would this be? Be something very simple. It's the entire, we call it the physiological apparatus of breathing. The nostrils, windpipe, lungs, all of these are conditions for the breath to take place. No nostrils, no windpipe, no lungs, then there's no breathing. So this is addition. No. I'm just putting that because I ran out of space at the bottom of the blackboard. It belongs under conditionality.
Well, I mean, we directly experience breathing apparatus.
Oh yeah, one can directly experience it. But it's there because it's a condition. But it's...
Okay, but it's not the direct experience of arising, it's a condition for...
It's a condition for the breathing, yeah. Or it's a condition for the body in the act, for the body to be engaged in the act of breathing. Okay, then the nature of vanishing is, in a way, it's just the converse of this. It's through the cessation of ignorance and craving and kama that the body will cease, that there will not be any further arising of the body. And also, if one is deprived of food, no food, then the body gets thinner, weaker, till it vanishes, no more body. And if there's no breathing apparatus, of course, then there's no more breath. And then through direct experience, one could actually observe the moment by moment vanishing of bodily phenomena in the course of the breath. So as one breathes in, with the in-breath, when the mind becomes very subtle, one experiences the arising of bodily phenomena and also the cessation of bodily phenomena. And then one turns the attention from certain times when we'll just be observing the arising, the continued arising, moment after moment of bodily phenomena, along with the breathing. At other times when we'll just be observing the vanishing, the breaking up and dissolution of bodily phenomena, along with the breathing. And at other times when we'll be observing both, alternately going from arising to vanishing, arising to vanishing, arising to vanishing. Okay, now we come to the third phase. Okay, this is stated in the sentence, or else mindfulness that there is a body is simply established in him to the extent necessary for bare knowledge, and I would now say for bare knowledge and constant mindfulness. Here it's not simply sati, but it's patti sati. Patti, this word pat, or this prefix patti means repeated, continuous. Okay, so in this phase, one is now, in a sense, simplifying the contemplation. So after doing these, what seem to be rather intricate, analytical and synthetic operations, observing the breath internally, externally, both, then observing the arising, the vanishing of the body. Now one simply establishes the mindfulness upon the body in the act of breathing, not even being concerned with in-breath, out-breath, whether the breath is long or short, but just taking the body as a whole in the act of breathing, just observing it as a kind of impersonal phenomena, bodily phenomena that is engaged in breathing in breathing out. And then the purpose for this bare awareness is, it says, to the extent necessary for jnanamataya patisatimataya, that's for bare knowledge and continual mindfulness. So that now one is doing this just to extend and deepen one's knowledge, one's understanding of the nature of the body, and to maintain continual uninterrupted mindfulness on the body. And then we come to the fourth phase, fourth phrase, fourth expression, which is in a sense the consummation of the practice, that one dwells, he abides, dwells independent, not clinging to anything in the world. This is, you might call it the fruit. It's not the ultimate fruit, but it's one of the initial fruits of the practice, is that one is able to dwell independently without any reliance, dependence upon anything, not clinging to anything in the world. Na ca kinchi loke upadhyati. That means the absence of upadana, of clinging. Okay, let me ask now at this point if there's any questions. Yes, Dr. Murray.
When one aware of oneself is not dependent, that's not consistent with Satipaṭṭhāna.
I see. I understand what you mean. Yeah, by being independent here, it doesn't mean that one is independent of conditions in the sense that one is not dependent upon certain conditions. What it means is that one dwells without being attached to anything. That one dwells without without relying upon anything. That sense of mental dependence, mental a sense of dependency, so one is able to take care of oneself, to dwell as one's own master, so to speak. Any further questions? Yeah, Peter.
You were talking about the translation of
Samudaya, yeah.
As contemplation of the nature of the life.
Yeah.
That doesn't change how we're understanding part 4 here, Dharma. Contemplation of phenomena, right? That's the contemplation of phenomena. That's still going to be phenomena.
I didn't quite
When
understand.
we get down to part 4
Yeah.
here, that's
The fourth
the fourth.
foundation of mindfulness.
That's still contemplation of phenomena.
That's contemplation of phenomena.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's not going to
Not the contemplation of
up to the nature of.
Dhammanupassana. I would take it as contemplation of phenomena, but contemplation of phenomena leads to understanding the nature of things, and then eventually that will lead to understanding the Dhamma, contemplation of the Dhamma. But I'll explain that when we come to it, yeah. Just any questions relevant to contemplation of breathing, to the mindfulness of breathing, or the refrain? Okay, then we'll go into the next exercise, next part of contemplation of the body. This is the 4 postures. In paragraph 6. Again, bhikkhus.
Sorry,
Uh,
sorry, just a quick question.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It reads, he does this, or he does this, or he does this other thing.
Yeah.
Can we understand that to mean that any one of these things will lead to his abiding independent, not clinging to anything? Or is it a sequence of refinement, which seems to be something you might have been suggesting?
I would say some things are dispensable, some things are necessary. In fact, okay, the way meditation is taught almost in all traditions now, there's a lot of emphasis on contemplating the body as the body internally. I don't know any meditation teachers which teach a method of contemplating the body as the body externally, or contemplating it both internally and externally. It just seems to be some aspect of, except by reinterpreting these phrases in such a way that they can integrate it into a system which works just with direct contemplation of the body. And it becomes particularly problematic when you get to feelings, states of mind. But I will give my understanding when we get to that. Okay. Contemplating in the body the nature of arising, vanishing, and both, that is extremely important. In fact, indispensable for the true development of insight up to its culmination. Because it's this contemplating the nature of arising, the nature of vanishing, that is leading into the insight into, the insight into arising and passing away. And that is we call it the first important insight that brings the understanding of impermanence, the deeper sense of impermanence. Like, impermanence doesn't mean simply the fact that whatever exists eventually comes to an end, but it's observing in one's own experience the arising and passing away of every factor, every component of one's experience. And so to get that direct insight into impermanence, one has to observe the arising and vanishing of various bodily and mental phenomena. Then it seems that the awareness that simply that there is a body, this is the practice which is used when the mindfulness becomes very strongly established, very well established, and the insight knowledges become very well established, so that now one doesn't have to make any deliberate effort to direct the mind in a particular way. But once the mindfulness and the capacity for insight are strongly established, then as soon as one, say, sits down and sets up mindfulness, extends the mindfulness through the body, just within, could be 30 seconds, a minute, immediately the awareness, the experience of, say, the arising and passing away will just establish itself almost spontaneously. And then one just has to sit there just observing the arising and vanishing, observing the arising and vanishing. It's not a deliberate effort anymore, but it's just all taking place, seemingly it's taking place on its own. And so one just sits there, establishes mindfulness, and then this process unfolds, leading to deeper knowledge and a continual sustained mindfulness. And then the consummation of this is always being independent, not clinging to anything in the world. I thought I said, Dr. Murray, did you have your...
How does one understand on the process here? Is this a conceptual program, or is this just opening the awareness to the energy field of the body? Is there a kind of programmatic overlay implied in this that you go through a checklist in your mind?
Is there a conceptual program? With the mindfulness of breathing, there is, I would call it a conceptual program in the sense that there are certain steps that one has to fulfill, sort of step-by-step procedure. I don't want to go into explain all of the steps of the conceptual program, but I would say that the conceptual program is a way of directing the attention to one's direct experience, and it keys the mind into the aspects of direct experience that one has to observe, that one should observe as the basis for the arising of the insight knowledges and the understanding. So it's not just sitting with a blank mind and saying, like, whatever happens, let it happen. One uses certain conceptual program as, say, directions for how to direct the mind. And that direction of the mind, the purpose first initially is to build up the mindfulness and awareness. And then when the mindfulness and awareness become built up and gain momentum, then one can apply them to observe things that are occurring at a very deep level, at very subtle levels, which become immediately apparent apart from any kind of conceptual program. You look like your hand was up. Did I see? No?
No.
Okay.
My confusion is still here about, I guess maybe I'm just being picky, but I'm confused as to why each thing says or else this or else that. If they're all, I'm just confused about why it's phrased that way. Maybe that's just maybe it doesn't imply anything at all.
Well, I think the way I explained it is the way to understand it. Well, it's the way I would understand it.
All right.
Yeah, Haywood?
I've heard that perhaps this sutra was not spoken by the Buddha. That this is like a compendium of all the techniques. So that one could, just listening to all the ways that one could set up.
Yeah. This is an interesting point because there are various translations of this in the Chinese Tripitaka, translations from other schools. There are several other versions of this which have exercises in the sutta in a different sequence, which seems to imply that the sutta was not delivered in the form that we have it now by the Buddha. It seems likely, I have no doubt that the directions all come from the Buddha. I don't see how anybody but a fully enlightened one could have given all of these directions. And this is what the interesting difference that I was intending to point out is that in the version in the Chinese Madhyamaka Agama, the mindfulness of breathing is not first, does not come first, but it comes after the section on the four postures, after the section on full awareness, but before the section on foulness. So it seems within the Chinese version, or the version that's been translated into Chinese, this comes from probably a branch of the Sarvastivada school. One begins with what we might call the grosser exercises, the exercises performed when one is active, like the postures, the different activities, and the full awareness. Then the mindfulness of breathing is the first exercise that is to be done in a sitting posture. Then that is followed by what is here called the foulness, then the observation of the elements, then the cemetery meditation. So the fact that there's a different sequence makes it unlikely that the sutta in the present form came from the Buddha. And I also believe in some of the other versions that the section on but then the Chinese version of the Madhyamaka, in the Madhyamaka Agama, under the section of contemplation of the body, they've put in it has other sections which to me seem not to have much relation to bodily awareness. Like it has a section on the abandoning of the five hindrances, I think, which seems an important aspect of meditation practice, but it's not very much an exercise in bodily awareness. Does somebody know the Chinese version? Is that correct? I didn't review it immediately before this class. And I didn't review Venerable Analayo's notes on it, I should say. But he did mention, Venerable Analayo, that there are some other sections in the contemplation of the body which seem not really fitting in well there. Then the section on the Dhammanupassana, the contemplation of phenomena, in all the different versions, it seems that it was originally much simpler, and the different schools found this to be a kind of umbrella category in which they put further exercises in order to make it a fuller, a more comprehensive practice. So the sutta almost certainly has undergone some degree of development, but I think it unlikely that it was entirely composed by an early generation of monks, that there was not what you call a nucleus or an original that would have come from the Buddha himself.
I was just saying that to say that would explain all the ores in there. And that this is not a prescription of how one perceive, but some people perceive this way.
Yeah, that's a good point. The ores could indicate also that there are different alternative routes for people with different characters, different inclinations. Though, as I said before, I would say that the contemplation of the nature of arising, vanishing, both, in some way or another, would be essential.
Yes, that goes with all this.
Yeah. Okay, let me go on now to the four postures. Okay, it's expressed very simply, almost deceptively. So, again, bhikkhus, when walking, a bhikkhu, that's a monk, understands, I am walking. When standing, he understands, I am standing. When sitting, he understands, I am sitting. When lying down, he understands, I am lying down. And then, or he understands accordingly, however his body is disposed. We might say, maybe I would now rephrase this, however his body is disposed, that too he understands in exactly that way. because the body can be placed in other positions besides the four main postures. Okay, but this passage begins with what is called in Buddhist texts, there's a technical term, the four Iriyapata. It means modes, usually translated modes of deportment. The ways of carrying oneself, carrying the body. Okay, and this exercise instructs the monk, or in this case it could be any meditator, to maintain mindfulness in all four of these postures. Whenever the body is engaged in any activity, it's engaged in that activity in one of these four postures or in some other posture. And in that other posture too, what is instructed to be mindful and to understand what one is doing, to know what one is doing. So instead of letting the mind drift and be carried away by stray thoughts, by wandering thoughts, one focuses the attention, the mindfulness upon the activity, upon the body engaged in that particular posture, and one knows that the body has assumed that posture and is engaged in that activity in that posture. And this becomes not only a supplement to other meditation subjects, but this can become a major meditation practice in itself, particularly the process of walking. And so within many of the existing meditation traditions, the walking meditation is used to alternate with other meditations done in the sitting posture. And sometimes many meditators in the forest traditions will use the walking meditation as their main meditation practice. And it can become quite a powerful meditation in itself. It's taught in different ways. Initially, one will be taught when doing the walking meditation just to be mindful. Usually when we'll have in the monasteries, say, of course my experience is in Sri Lanka, in the meditation monasteries, the monks, each monk has a little hut, we call it a kuti, and the kuti always has, or usually has with it, a walkway. Since it's warm in those countries, the walkway, it's often outside under trees. The walkway, it's about 30 paces. It's smooth ground, smooth earth. It will have boundaries, blocks of stone as boundaries. Sometimes at either end, or one end, sometimes at both ends, there will be stone seats, cement seats, so that one could, after doing the walking meditation, then one could do sitting meditation outside. And so when doing the walking meditation, one will begin by walking mindfully, perhaps just one step, being mindful of each step at a time, being mindful of right step, left step, right step, left step, right step, left step. One walks the 20, 30 paces of the walkway. It's called in Pali chankama. In singular they call it sakman. One walks 20 or 30 paces. Then mindfully one stops. Then mindfully one remains in the standing posture just for a few moments. And then one knows standing. Then one turns around. Mindfully one is aware of turning. This is one of the other postures besides the four main ones. Being aware of turning, then one pauses, one is mindful of standing for a few moments, standing, then one starts walking back, right, left, and one can do this for a long time, could be half an hour, even 45 minutes, and then one resumes the sitting meditation. But then there are ways of developing the walking meditation until it leads to very, very subtle levels of awareness. Like one way this is done, especially comes from Burma, but actually the Burmese have picked it up from the commentaries, and that is to divide the step into phases. So one might begin by taking a single step and dividing it into 3 phases. Picking the foot up, pushing it forward, putting it down. Then the next step, picking up, pushing forward, putting down. And so with each step one becomes aware of these 3 phases. Then, this is the way I learned it in Sri Lanka, the teacher will tell you that with each step there's not only the body moving, but there's also the intention to put the foot in that position. And so you have to be aware of the intention along with each phase of the step. So before you pick the foot up, you have to be mindful of the intention of picking the foot up. Before pushing the foot forward, aware of the intention of pushing forward. Then you become aware of the act of pushing forward. Then before putting the foot down, aware of the intention to put the foot down. Then aware of the action of putting the foot down. Then you do the same thing with the left foot. So now you're getting 6 objects of awareness in each step. Intention to pick up, picking, the act of picking. Intention to push forward, act of pushing. Intention to put down, act of putting down. Then there's a way of breaking this up, each step into 6 phases of action with 6 intentions going along with it, so you get 12 components within a single step. But no need to explain that. But once you get to the breaking the step up into 12 components, I can tell you my own experience was like you're walking on the walkway, just going from one end to the other. Maybe you've looked at the watch. When you start the walk, you come to the end of the walkway, maybe it seems like 10 minutes have gone by. You look at the watch, maybe an hour and 15 minutes have gone by. Just to walk 20 or 30 steps. Okay, but that is only one way of doing the walking meditation. And what happens when one does the walking meditation that way, because one is becoming aware of each step, of all of the components that make up each step, one is seeing how each step has these components, is made up of these components, and within a single step, each of these components or phases stops, ends, before the next one occurs. So let's just take the 3, picking, pushing forward, putting down. At the time of pushing forward, the picking up is finished. The time of putting down, the pushing forward has ended. The time of picking up the next foot, the putting down of the previous foot has ended. The time of pushing forward, the picking up has ended. The time of putting down, the pushing forward has ended. And so now the mind is getting attuned. This is maybe the conceptual program that's going on here. through this breaking up the step into the phases, one is getting attuned to the subtle differentiation that's taking place within experience that we almost always miss because we do things quickly without attending to this, all the subtle differences, subtle transformations, transitions that take place within these actions, the actions that are taking place. But when we attend to them, then we can see, especially when one is doing this repeatedly, hour after hour, day after day, the mind gets very, very subtle, becomes very precise, so that one can see the arising and passing away of all of these phenomena, to the point when one is doing the walking meditation, that even when one is lifting the foot, picking the foot up, it's not like just one continuous action of picking, but it's like 1,000 or 100,000 little actions of pick, 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 till the foot reaches the maximum point of being picked up. Then pushing the foot forward, it's not just one continuous action, but it's like 100,000 little actions of push, 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 push. Then putting the foot down, it's 1,000, 100,000 little actions in a split second of putting the foot down, putting down. And what experiences the transitions taking place, this is the arising and passing away, the arising and passing away, till it's occurring thousands of times in a second. Well, it's always occurring thousands of times in a second, but one is seemingly able to tune into it occurring thousands of times within a second. Okay, and then maintaining this body, this mindfulness of the body in all the four postures, then one builds up a continuity of mindfulness. So whether one is standing, sitting, lying down, one is aware of it. Then with the sitting, this is also another exercise that instead of attending to, but one could only do this successfully after one has built up the capacity for mindfulness through some other exercise, but one could just sit down and just attend mindfully to the body in the sitting posture, and then let the attention diffuse itself through the whole body, aware simply of the body sitting, and then let the mindfulness go through the whole body from the top of the head down to the very tips of the toes of the feet, very tips of the fingers, and then the mindfulness will just diffuse itself through the whole body. So one is now able to maintain this mindfulness and awareness of the whole body in the sitting posture. Okay, in this way he abides contemplating the body as a body internally. Then externally, of course, he can't be aware or experiencing the bodies of others unless he has some supernormal powers, but he will be aware of other people's bodies in whatever positions they are disposed, whether others are walking, standing, sitting. And he'll see actually the whole world of living beings as consisting of bodies in these different postures. And then he'll do this alternatingly, aware of one's own body, the body of others, one's own body, the body of others. And then one goes through each of the other steps of the process, and he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. Okay. Are there questions on any? Yeah.
I had gotten an impression that the labeling of one's minimal actions, like I'm standing, moving, putting,
Yeah.
was something of a recent innovation in Burma, say by Mahasi Sayadaw. But this seems to make it actually original. The use of mental labels like this.
Yeah, I don't quite agree that the labeling is an innovation of Mahasi Sayadaw. I just think he's formulated in a somewhat explicit way what is already being stated here in the Satipaṭṭhāna Sutta. I think maybe what's original, well, not original with him, since he learned his technique of meditation from his own teacher, and it would have come down in a lineage in Burma. Yeah, maybe that labeling technique is not original to him at all.
This is not a question on the sutta,
Yeah.
a question on postures. In several suttas, I've seen them refer to a squatting posture. Have you ever seen that?
I know there is a squatting posture. I don't recall seeing that referred to in a sutta. Unless it could be in the description of the ascetic practices. Let's see where that would come.
Yeah, I have to.
Yeah, maybe continue.
It wasn't in Theravada. That was in some of the Mahayana.
The squatting posture. Yeah, I don't know. Within this framework, the squatting would be just included in some other way in which the body is disposed. Yeah.
But I've never seen anybody do that. But I've seen several references to squatting.
Yeah, squatting is very common in India. Well, in India and countries influenced by India, you see. Well, I've seen it in Sri Lanka, like men waiting for a bus. They squat down and they just can wait in that squatting posture, like sort of like pigeons on the branch of a tree.
No, I mean, but as a way to meditate.
As a way to meditate.
Yeah.
Oh.
Like a frog, right? Like a frog.
More like a bird on the branch of a tree. Well, I don't know if squatting is a way to meditate. I think it would be very uncomfortable.
Well, I thought it might be very comfortable. Many people do it.
Do they?
For a long time.
Some of us think sitting cross-legged on the floor is very uncomfortable.
Well, when you get used to it, it becomes comfortable and it's very stable. Any further questions? I think maybe I should not try to get into the clear comprehension section of what's called here the full awareness section tonight, since that requires some elaboration and then it might take too long.
I looked at the Nibbāna once, and there was a bewildering array of meditation techniques and objects.
There was a
Bewildering array of meditation objects.
yeah.
Is it the case that all of that has been added and that the only technique that the Buddha himself taught was the meditation?
No, I think that's not the case. The techniques in the Visuddhimagga have been drawn from the suttas. Let us see, there are 40 techniques of what's called samatha, tranquility meditation, serenity meditation. see, 10 of them are not really such different techniques. Actually, when you get to the 20 of them, okay, 10 of them are called kasinas. Kasina is a disc representing an element or a color. Now the use of the kasina, it seems to me, and to many scholars, is something that was not original with the Buddha. These would have been methods of samadhi meditation that predated the Buddha, and the Buddha simply included them within. He mentions them. He doesn't especially emphasize them, but he mentions them as techniques that some of his own disciples used for meditation. So this seems to have been part of the background of meditative experience that predated the Buddha, that the Buddha simply incorporated into his own system, not giving very much emphasis to the kasinas. But for some reason the Visuddhimagga has used the kasina meditation as its basis for explaining samatha, the serenity meditation. And so when you say 40 meditations, 10 are kasinas, 4 elements, the earth, water, liquid, fire and air kasinas, then 4 colors, blue, red, yellow, and white. And then there is the limited space kasina and the light kasina. Okay, then another 10 so-called bewildering diversity of meditation subjects are actually the 10 asubha, this is the repulsive meditation subjects. These are the body, the cemetery contemplations, bodies in the cemeteries or in cremation grounds in different stages of decay. Again, in the Buddha's texts, in the suttas, the Buddha doesn't really give very much attention to them. He just mentions them. Then comes 6 recollections. 3 of them are devotional, recollection of the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. Of course, these would be original to the Buddha. Recollection of virtue, of morality, generosity, and the devas, the deities. These the Buddha recommended especially for lay people. Then there are the four sublime states: boundless loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, and equanimity. You see, so the 40 are really falling into sets. And then in addition to those, we have, the 4 formless meditations. Again, these pre-existed the Buddha, the time of the Buddha, and these are just higher stages of samadhi that the Buddha incorporated into his system. So now I think we have 34, I think I've covered 34 subjects. And what is left? Mindfulness of breathing, the meditation on the parts of the body that we're going to come to, the meditation on the elements, the 4 elements, meditation on peace, that's the sort of reflective contemplation on Nibbāna. Elements, parts of the body, peace, I don't remember the others. Anybody remember the others? I did the kasina. 10 kasinas, 10 stages of decay. It's 20. Anyway, you see that there's not such a great diversity. But the Buddha, the one that he gave the highest recommendation to is mindfulness of breathing. He says that that is the Tathagata Vihara, that is the dwelling of his own dwelling place, is the meditation on the breath. But not everybody is disposed to that, so the Buddha taught different techniques according to different temperaments. And those 40 subjects, those are all subjects of concentration meditation, of samatha. Then vipassana, insight meditation, works in a different way. Any further questions? No questions? Okay, then we will have to stop now. Sharing of the merits. Okay, we share the merit now with the deities, the Naga spirits, and with other beings, asking them to protect the Buddha's teaching, to protect the world, to protect ourselves and others. Then we ask them to rejoice in the merits and to achieve all success. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mam parang. Etavata cha ammehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavata cha amhehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavata cha amhehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe satthanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya.